The only reasonable prediction is that we are in for more of an escalating war of attrition, and these things historically end with some kind of deal, but possibly not when you're dealing with madmen. So the question here is what Ukraine will do with the fact that it does need Western support. So it's critical for Ukraine to maintain the support of its allies and to not allow the Western public to be lulled into a sense where the war is just part of the landscape that might be sad, but is ultimately inevitable in the way that our death and taxes and people voting for authoritarians.
The only thing we will see, if the things on the ground will change for other side, then will be the room for negotiations. Because right now, of course, sides actually see each other as strong. And despite that Russia maybe have problems, it still has a strong army and still has a lot of military capabilities, even on the number. Despite Ukraine, of course, gets a lot of weaponry from the West. And actually, what's a good sign, what President Zelensky has visited United Kingdom, and he was promised that the Ukrainian pilots will be trained on the Western plains, which is because first of all you train pilots and then you see how they fly and then you give them planes in any case, right? So I think that's a good sign for
the West is still reluctant to give Ukraine weapons or encouragement to take the offensive into Russian soil. So I think both sides in the end are interestingly holding back from what they can do. Nothing really prevents Ukraine from attacking Russia, but they dare not do it. And I have to say, nothing really prevents Russia from raining absolute hellfire on Ukrainian cities. And we see that they bombed, they sent missiles at Kiev again, but of course they could do a lot worse, and they're not. So they're holding back a little bit. And wars of attrition, as I said before, end with deals, but they also end sometimes with unexpected escalations or one side suing for peace. Putin is so inscrutable that I have to say it's conceivable he does both, although the latter is obviously less likely.
So Dan Perry, to that point exactly, how long can Ukraine wait with its counteroffensive?
Well, I mean, that's just the question. And, as of recently, they were actually telegraphing that it'll have to wait a bit longer. These hints go back and forth, but, in wartime, it is not especially wise to truthfully telegraph your intentions.
Yeah.
So I have to take everything that both sides say with a grain of salt, especially Russia, obviously, because the Kremlin is not known for, it's known for its economy with the truth. But also, it is not unwise for Zelensky and the Ukrainians to also benefit from the fog of war.
Yeah, smoke screens are sometimes the strongest weapon. Alexander Konstantin Botansky, excuse me. If Kyiv fails to beat Moscow, is it risking losing the support of the West?
I'm afraid no, because the war in Ukraine actually it's a challenge for all Western values. It's not a threat to Ukraine only. Putin in his speeches mentioned lots of times that he is in war with NATO and with the West.
Look, what Russia has done is a disgrace that will be etched in history forever. And Putin is, without question, a war criminal, and Ukraine is a side that needs to be defended. I am under no suspicion of being an apologist for Russia in this war, but I also have to call out dogma when I hear it. There is a notion that if the West lets Ukraine fall, or lets any part of Ukraine fall, like for example, lets Putin get away with a land grab in the east, the way it already has done with Crimea, then oh my God, Putin is going to attack the West and it'll all crumble like dominoes. And I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure that I see Russia attacking Germany or Romania, maybe Moldova. It's very clear and has been for decades that Putin covets Ukraine and thinks it's a fictitious country. The fact that he attacked it is, sadly, not that big a surprise at the end of the day. The domino theory, I'm not sure holds. What certainly does hold is that it's a bad sign for other dictators elsewhere, other autocratic countries, like, let's say, China vis-a-vis Taiwan. Of course it's a bad sign, but the world is full of bad signs, and history is full of bad karma. And to think that the be-all and end-all is the survival of Ukraine, I think is a little bit naive and extremely dogmatic. Politicians are gonna go that way for sure. Activists, I have to say, in countries that are affected, might be inclined to go along, but journalists, analysts, and global intelligence agencies, I think should beware of axiomatic conceptions.
Yeah, all the everlasting optimists you've just named there, Dan Perry. Alexander Bratursky, what do you think?
Never been called that before.
Oh, I would definitely agree with this assumption. And yeah, that's not apologizing. That's a pure fact.
I would say that it was a partial success. I mean, you got planes and drones and missiles and armored vehicles and some light tanks and training, as we heard, and $3 billion from Germany, which is unusual and interesting. So he has massive support. But Europe is also holding back a little. They haven't really cut off trade and banking with Russia. They still import a lot of liquefied natural gas to make up the shortfall in the pipelines. So honestly, I think for Zelensky, it's a question of how to keep pushing and keep demanding more while not appearing annoyingly ungrateful.
Konstantin Batotsky, annoyingly ungrateful?
It is definitely a success for Ukraine because apart from arm deals, and jet agreement, we also received lots of appreciation for our European Union and NATO membership, which is extremely important for Ukrainian internal agenda, since overwhelming majority of Ukrainians just wish our country becomes a part of European Union and NATO.
I think for Ukraine, EU membership is both more critical and more important than NATO membership, because what the EU provides it with is not replaceable through any other means. Whereas the US, whereas the NATO can choose to come to the aid of Ukraine even without formal membership, and I do suspect that Zelensky knows this very well.
Among all those who are trying to broker some sort of a solution, who's got the best chances, Konstantin?
No one, because none of these people can actually influence Putin or force him to make an effort. Ukraine has a peace plan, and for us, the peace is to defeat Russia at the battlefield and to regain our borders. We tried all other methods before. We received multiple guarantees that didn't work out. 40 million of Ukrainians have a right to be perceived and heard. So that is our position, to defeat Russia at the battlefield.
I would think that given that the world has given Ukraine tens of billions of dollars and taken some risks, the world has heard the Ukrainians. And clearly your support is massive, and I don't dispute it. And neither do I dispute that rewarding an aggressive dictator for war crimes is in principle a bad idea. However, that issue aside, there's nothing sacrosanct about Ukraine's borders. They were the result of internal Soviet machinations done by dictators whose intentions were not pure. So if you really want a peace deal, I think you need to be a little more clever than this maximalist position.
That's the global zeitgeist, if you will. Dan Perry, Konstantin Batotsky, and Alexander Bratursky, thank you so very much for joining us.